encounter more of these roadblocks. And sometimes we're dealing with all of them all at once in our lives.
Mark, how do you ask? I'm glad you talk about faith in God in the book. That's important to me. And this concept of asking God, how do you do that? What is that? How does it work? I pray every night, but asking God, what do you mean when you say that? And how does one do that?
Okay, so two parts. First, I'll do the practical. When Jack and I needed the title for Chicken Soup, we knew we had to killer a book because audiences said that's got to be in a book. And we didn't have the right title, so we respectively, this is before cell phones, went to our houses and 400 times said, mega best-selling title, mega best-selling title, mega best-selling title. Jack calls me at 2:58 in the morning and says, Chicken Soup. I said, for the soul. I got goosebumps. He got goosebumps. For us, yeah, that was corroboration of truth. We knew that worked. Now, 144 publishers kicked us out and said, hit the road, Jack. And they didn't. I said, look, it's okay if you don't like Dr. Canfield, but I'm a really nice guy. I'm joking. Jack's wonderful and a great friend, of course. But then what we're teaching about asking is that, because what Crystal said is these 7 roadblocks are so cluttered in our mind, unless you go to sleep, and the most important time, the subconscious never sleeps. So to get deep in your innermost, highermost, God-centered mind, what you're going is, God, what's your destiny for me? God, what's your destiny for me? God, what's your destiny for me? 400 times, push back, sleep. Tell your sweetiekins, before I go to sleep, I'm going to wake up. And if Mark and Crystal are telling the truth, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to have the answer and I'm going to have to write it down. And I got to have paper and pen next to the bed and turn on the lights and write it out, because you will not remember. You got to do it immediately when you wake up in the middle of the damn night. And you had that. I mean, you didn't get where you are without waking up in the middle of the night with answers. And when you ask questions, you get answer, solution, illumination, revelation, and new awareness. Has that been your experience?
1,000,000%. If I could just add to that. So, by the way, I should say this. A couple of those 500,000 books were Chicken Soup for the Soul books, by the way, everybody, but several million of them.
Yeah.
But so I must second what you've just said, and then I'll let you jump back in. So now I've had 2 of the icons that I respect the most say the same thing to me. So I want to stamp this point with everybody. You'll get a kick out of this too, guys. I won my first incentive trip for a business I was in to go to Hawaii. Running on the beach early in the morning. You get rewarded for getting up before the sun sometimes, right? There's this man, bald man, hairy. Eventually Warren runs by me. It's kind of a hairy back, runs right by me in Maui. You probably know where I'm going with this.
Yep,
and
I know who it
runs
is.
Further, I got a Sony Walkman on, and it's Wayne Dyer.
Yeah.
And I stop and I say, Dr. Dyer, I'm getting chills right now. I said, Dr. Dyer, I just wanted to thank you. You've changed my life. And he stops and he goes, how'd I do that? And I said, well, I'd love to tell you. And he walks back, and guys, I got to sit on the beach for about an hour with Wayne Dyer and watch the sun come up. We went through a bunch of different things. He was writing The Power of Intention at that time. Anyway, long story short, the main takeaway I had was, he said, when the evening wind wakes you up, don't go back to sleep. Get up and write. He goes, the key to my life has been that when I do wake up after I've asked these things, I know I'm not going to remember in the morning. I just begin to write. And I've had that practice really since that time for the last 20 years of my life, exactly what you just said. So that's 2 now that have said it to me. It's amazing.
Wayne and I are friends since back when he was a university professor at St. John's. And I used to carry in his books for him and sell those books in the back. And he and I spent a lot of happy hours together. We spent a lot of time with him in Maui because we've been friends until he passed away a year ago or so. And the point is that Wayne became prolific because of that. And he kept, if you'll forgive me, and I don't have any right to say this, but I'm going to tell you what you just said is accurate. Wayne lived in the question. Socrates lived in the question. I got goosebumps telling you that. So for me, it's corroboration of truth. If somebody listening out there isn't getting goosebumps or going, Mark's out to lunch, I'm okay with that. But for me and for you, it's true. You got goosebumps. And we knew the Wayne story because every time we went to Maui, we'd be sitting at a restaurant. He'd be over there. And I'd say, pay for that guy's dinner. And the lady said, why are you paying for his dinner? He's rich. I said, so am I. But pay for his dinner and then you come over and sit with us.
That's beautiful.
Wayne said, what the hell are you doing praying for my meal? I said, because every time you come over and talk to everybody I bring here. So.
Oh, it's beautiful. I think it's so beautiful that he had such a role in both of our lives. I had no idea that was the case. And you're exactly right. He lived in the ask. It's so true. I think also, curiosity is something that we lose often when we get further away from our childhood. When we're kids, we're willing to ask more questions because we're curious. I think as adults, we almost become punished for our curiosity sometimes. And I'm curious about asking for what you want. You said there's 7 roadblocks. I want everyone to read the book, so we're not going to go through all 7, certainly. But we've talked a little bit about the childhood conditioning piece of it. That's certainly my jam for sure.
Mhm.
That's the one that keeps showing up for me. But what would one more be that somebody should be evaluating? And we'll keep the other 5 for people to go get the book. But what is another one of these roadblocks?
Well, let's just talk about what you were just talking about, that childhood curiosity. The next one is naivete. And we don't know what we don't know. And we tell the story in the book, Ed, about this lovely Filipino woman who came to work when our children were little. You know, the kids are 16 months apart, and she'd make all these amazing dishes from her homeland. And one day she shows up and cuts this fruit on a plate, and she goes, "Here, try this." And I bit into this juicy orange fruit, and I go, "Melda, what is this? This is the most amazing fruit I've ever tasted." And she goes, "It's a mango." And I go, "Mango? How come I've never tasted a mango? That's bizarre. I've traveled all over Europe. How did I miss the mangoes?" But, you know, I realized I'm a girl from Idaho, grew up with a lot of potatoes, but no mangoes.
Right.
And it made me start to think. I really pondered that, like, what else am I missing in my life besides the greatest fruit in the world, just because I don't even know it's available to me? I go, "Melda, where'd you get these? Did you import them from the Philippines?" She goes, "No, they're at the grocery store." And I thought, I'm walking by this every day. What else am I walking past? What person am I walking past? Not even notice, not even curious. Because I just don't know. I'm naive, right? I might be walking past the greatest advocate I've ever had, the best friend I might have, or some opportunity I'm not aware of because of that naivete. And I think we're all naive in some way. And that is one of our roadblocks to asking. We need to look around more. We need to rekindle that childlike curiosity and wonder about that person you're walking past, wonder about that company, that opportunity, that thing that you haven't even stopped to inquire about. That's part of the magic of life, where life starts to unfold for you when you start to go back into that wonder. And I think if you read the fable of Michaela, where the book starts, right?
Unbelievable.
So that's one of the places that Michaela, she starts to wonder because she's so shut down in her life. And I won't get too deep into it unless you want to talk about that.
Well, I want them to read the book, but to me, that's the brilliance of the book. It's the beginning. We should talk about it a little bit, share a little bit of that story, but I want them to get it. To me, there's a brilliance of the way this book is written, everybody, that's so enjoyable to read, because you do get this sort of story in the beginning, then it's weaved together with the points. And when you're reading it, I love reading something and I say, that's true, that's me, I know that. And it's just, there's these validations of things when you read the book. So let's talk a little bit about it. You go into that a little bit as far as you want to go, because I do want them to get the book too, right? So
yeah, no, and it's good. I mean, so the fable of Michaela, Mark and I wanted to use a fable because we love stories. Stories are so relatable, and our brain thinks in patterns. So when we can share a story that's relatable, we learn so quickly. Human beings can learn so quickly from stories. So I took a lot of times we passed the writing back and forth, and I started writing this, and honestly, it was like it had a life of its own, and I just took off. I had so much joy writing this. I feel like I was downloading it. The whole story, all the characters came. And I've been fortunate enough in my life to have these amazing dreams that have guided me, very spiritual dreams. So I kind of modified my own dreams a little bit, and Michaela has these dreams, right? But completely different story, of course, but just to let the listeners know. So Michaela starts off, she's lost everything in her life. Basically, she's lost her mother, her father, her home's been taken away by the bill collector. She's sleeping in a grove of trees. And her job every day as an indentured servant at a stone quarry is to lift heavy rocks from one place to another. And I think that's how a lot of people feel in this life right now, is that their entire life is just feels like moving heavy rocks from one place to another, and they've lost hope. And that's where Michaela was. So this story is really every woman and every man's story. But Michaela, falls into an exhausted sleep, and the being comes to her and he takes her on this journey. And I'm not going to tell everything, but the gist of it is he shows her some really beautiful things, and he admonishes her to asking and never stop asking. And that's the key. Yes. And so when she wakes up, she knows already something has shifted, because that's what happens to each of us when we have those moments, those spiritual little epiphanies. We can shift everything in a moment, absolutely everything, just with a little awareness. And so that's what happens. So she starts little by little, Michaela's life starts shifting. She starts paying attention to the words, the dreams. And by the end of Michaela's story, she is a completely different person than she was when she started. And that is what can happen to every single person listening. We all have that in us. We all have the essence of God inside of us. We all have every possibility and potential inside of us. And so that story flowed up out of me from somewhere to really remind people, I think, of what is inside of each one of them and each one of you who's listening, and to really start to ask the questions that will reveal your next step to you.
Yeah, I got to tell you that the Michaela could have been an entire book.
Yeah.
And one of the things I took from it's weird, sometimes writing to me is art. So there's teaching. This book teaches you a lot of things, but I think when something's great, it can mean different things to different people based on their life stage. And so for me, it's interesting. My takeaway was, I can tell when you were writing it wasn't necessarily for this purpose, but for me it was. And that was that my life started to change when I realized that the quality of the questions I was asking myself was directly correlated to the quality of my emotions and my life. And that I was also conditioned as a child to ask a certain sort of questions and take certain sorts of meanings away from events in my life. And those questions were on repeat. So everyone listening to this or watching it, you're already asking some questions. But to be aware, as you just said, Crystal, to take an inventory and start to ask a different question literally changes your life. And then as you're one new relationship, one new question, one new breakthrough, potentially one new emotion away from a totally different life. But if you run the same pattern of questions you're asking yourself all the time, you're going to take the same meetings away, have the same emotions, and have the same life. It's just a pattern. So Mark, could you speak to that? Because you talked a little bit about conditioning in the brain. We can go that direction or not, but what about just being intentional about the caliber and quality of the questions you're asking yourself, not just other people?
First of all, I love the way this seminar or Zoom call is going. But
feels like a seminar. It's that when you were doing a good one.
It's a seminar in my mind. So one of the 7 roadblocks is pattern paralysis. And my teacher's teacher in graduate school, my teacher's Dr. R. Buckminster Fuller, J. Dessick Jones, thousands of inventions, 15 doctors at Harvard. But his teacher was Albert Einstein. Albert said, look, if you keep doing the same thing and expect something new, in German, it's you're cuckoo, meaning you're crazy. Well, that's exactly what you just said. So what you've done with question only, God gave us his ability to question everything. It changes your path. It changes your life force. And what you said, I'm going to morph it just a little bit because some people out there are hanging out by their fingernails because of the COVID confinement cocoon, and say the kind of question you ask determines where your prosperity, your wealth, your riches is going to be. 1974, when I tried to be Bucky Fuller, and I can't be a good Bucky. I can be a good Marky. I can't be a good Bucky. So I went bankrupt. I checked a book at the library, How to Go Bankrupt by Yourself, because I asked, what if I go bankrupt? Subconscious doesn't get a dang what question you ask, but it magnifies it back to your side, the quantity of the question, quality of the question. But now I said, well, how do I get rich? How do I get successful? How do I get prosperous? How do I be a person of influence? Because Solomon's most important line, and he was a really important guy, but Psalm 72, be an influencer of influencers, which is what your show's all about, Ed. And your influence is growing, which is what it's meant to. You're meant to multiply. You're meant to expand. I mean, you've taken a 98-pound weakling and turned him into a superstar strong guy, but that's what you've done with your mind and your soul and your being. I hope you don't mind my teasing.
No, I appreciate it very much. Thank you. I think it's important, guys. When I'm listening to the show back, like in my mind, because it does feel like a seminar to me, like kind of a master class, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I want to stamp this. I want you to get the book. I don't say this on the show very often, guys. I just want you to know I have authors on. I don't normally say it this firmly because I'm so convinced that we're even oftentimes oblivious to the questions. Like, for example, what question am I asking myself that causes me the fear to walk up to the hostess at the restaurant? Somewhere in there's this question of what is she going to think about me, right? Is that bizarre? Like, I'm paying for a meal. She might even know who I am when I walk up there, but yet I still have these questions. And if you're evaluating, I've been through everything. I've listened to every show. I'm still not making a move in my life. It's probably the questions. It's the lack of questions you're willing to ask other people. And it's the questions that don't serve you that you're asking yourself, everybody. So I really want to stamp this because even in my own mind, this is a unique yet profound truth perspective about how to change the direction of your life. It's not something most people are talking about right now. And I think the timing is perfect for all of you coming out of what we've just come out of, for example. What are the questions you need to be asking yourself? And that's what I wanted to go to next. So I'm going to throw it out there. If I'm trying to pivot, So I'm at a point, I'm listening to the show for whatever reason. I'm just not where I want to be physically, spiritually. Maybe I'm not in the relationship that I want. I'm working for somebody, but I want to be an entrepreneur. Where do I begin on these questions? What would you recommend my starting point be in terms of asking questions?
Right. It's such a great question. And everybody wants to know, like, what questions do I ask? And we give a ton of questions in the book,
Yes.
Holding up the mirror questions, self-intervention questions. So it's all about the question. You can reveal so much about yourself. You can reveal everything about yourself and your life.
Crystal, I didn't interrupt you. Can you give them, I want you to keep going. Could you give them the holding up the mirror question? Just because to me, that's one of them that stood out for me. Just that one, please.
Like, okay, so when you're having this emotional feeling, like you were just about anything, say you're in a relationship, and you think, oh gosh, he's doing this to me because, he doesn't love me enough, or blah, 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 all these things. Start to hold up the mirror. What am I feeling right now? In this moment? Is the information that, I feel like he hates me. Well, is that information true?
Right.
Like what, right? So you're questioning, you're basically looking at every single thing you're feeling and experiencing and holding up the mirror and saying, what is it about this that is causing me to feel this way? Does it have any truth?
Yeah.
Am I responding in a way that is just programming from my old experiences? What are those experiences that seem similar to this, that I'm probably tagging on to this experience right now? I promise you, every single problem that couples have is usually that baggage from the past that we never get into, right? And so I love to tell people, so the ask yourself part, Ed, is that reflective journey, okay? And there are really three critical phases of that. The first critical phase is, where am I right now? Like whatever it is, whether you're dealing with your relationships, your career, even your health and fitness, it's that moment of truth. Where am I right now? Because you can't figure out where to go until you really start to question yourself and start to understand where you are right now, really and truly. How are you feeling? Are you happy with this thing you're doing? Does it feel right? Does this career that you're doing feel like it's in alignment with you, or this relationship, whatever it is? When you start to ask, where am I right now with this? A whole bunch of questions will open up to you, sub questions. The second sort of critical phase is, where do I want to be? And it's striking to me as a transformational life coach, how few people spend time with themselves asking these questions. Where do I really want to be in my life? What do I really want? And we're afraid to ask the question big enough. So Mark and I always say, ask the question from the greatest place in your imagination, from the nth degree of your greatest imagination. Just don't ask how to get through the next day, but ask, where do I really want to be in my ultimate state of life? Say in my career. And then imagine your greatest career, and then start asking the questions backwards. In this greatest career of my imagination, who am I talking to every day? How am I serving? What products, what services? How are people responding to what I'm bringing? What does that feel like? Who are my top clients? And in that way, you can literally start to engineer your perfect life backwards, but you have to take the time in the questions, in the asking of those questions. Yeah. And then the third critical phase of that is, what specific action steps do I need to take to move that forward? Because so often, and we say, get your asking journal, write down everything, because you will get illuminations, you'll get solutions, you'll get ideas, plans will start to form. You need to write them down and keep asking your way forward. You need to pick up the phone and call that person that came to mind, right? Yes. Because this is all feedback from the universe, from God's perfectly divine universe. It's funny because we looked at a lot of studies when we were doing this book, Ed, and when you ask yourself a question, a different part of your brain lights up. And it's the part of your brain that does critical thinking. So suddenly you're asking yourself a question and your own brain becomes a better resource to you. Oh. But so few people get stuck in the problem and never ask their way out of it. So they just see the problem and regurgitate it.
You're so right. I'm sitting there thinking of all the applications for this wisdom that's in the book and that you guys teach. I'm thinking about it not even as an individual. If I were leading a company right now and we're in a rut, we're not moving. You said from a big place. Perhaps your job as a leader in that company is to ask a bigger and better question to your leadership. What's the different question you need to be asking them? You want to change the direction of your company. Maybe you need to ask a different question of the leadership in your company, a bigger, bolder question, because they've been in this pattern of the old one. Or maybe if you want to change your family dynamic, there's a question your family's asking. You're just not conscious of it. So what's the bigger question that transforms your family into a magnificent? If you're leading a church, what's the bigger question? I'm going to ask you guys a question that I don't think you've been asked. And I'm curious about it. I'll share mine first. But I was thinking, as I was prepping even more this morning, I was really excited about today. And I was thinking, I really was. And this is confirmation of it. So for me, I did a lot of work on this many years ago, these questions I even asked me. And I wanted to find out, like, what is something that's always being asked in my little mind or my big mind that I should be aware of that doesn't serve me? And I uncovered that I asked myself often as a young person, as an adult, even when I became a relatively, whatever you want to call, successful or wealthy person, I had this question, almost like, what do I need to worry about right now? What do I need to worry about? And I would constantly find things to worry about. I used to have this saying where I'd go, I function very well in chaos because I grew up in it. Then I realized I keep creating chaos so that I think I function well in it. And so I create this chaos by constantly asking a dominant question of what should I be worried about right now? Because as a little boy, I worried, is dad coming home tonight? If he didn't come home, or if he did come home, which dad's walking through the front door? Do I need to worry it's drunk dad who's sort of, stay away from him, or is it happy dad? And this question, this conditioning you talked about earlier, is a dominant question in my life. And when I started to take control of that, my life changed. I'm curious from each of you, is there a question that you evaluated for yourselves that you used to ask yourself, maybe that didn't serve you, that you've replaced with a more intentional, bigger, better question?
Oh boy, I know exactly the answer to that because I caught myself, when you start to go through this process. So I think my question, Ed, was always like, who do I need to fix today? Mm-hmm. Right? Who do I need to fix? Mm-hmm. And I spent so much of my younger life, because I started to having epiphanies and breakthroughs. I had so much awareness about how one could just completely transform your life if you had the awareness of what's possible. But then I would see like addictions in my family. My father struggled with addiction. It wasn't as blatant as that. It was more of a hidden thing, but it still surfaces in different ways. And I love my dad. He was absolutely brilliant. But so often I was looking around to see who can I fix? How can I fix them? And then finally I had to accept that I can't fix anyone, that unless and until they come to me and ask for my help and truly, truly want help in some way. But it's more about, my question now is, how can I hold the space of love for them to discover and thrive, right? For them to grow, discover, and thrive. How can I hold that space?
Oh, I love that.
Right?
I love that. I love that. I may steal that question from you, by the way.
Yeah. It's an important one when you're a fixer. And I think when you grow up with some dysfunction, and you're the one who sees it clearly, you tend to be the fixer, right?
You're so right. I know God's involved in our conversation today. When we're done, you should go check my Instagram story, because just about 2 hours ago, I posted saying, listen, you really can't help fix somebody in their life. They have to come to their own conclusion, because I have a little bit of that myself. And so, my goodness, what a beautiful restatement and a much more powerful question. Mark, what about you? I'm curious.
This is like a whole 8-hour seminar, but I'm going to do it at the end of our book. We ask all the biggest questions ever. And the biggest question that is asked by the guy who started Singularity is an MD, Harvard, PhD, MIT next door, is asked, his name's Peter G. Demandis, and Peter says, and he's a friend, but what are you going to do to positively affect 1 billion people in the next decade?
Yes.
Now, most of the people listening are going to be alive for 10 years. And he goes, hey, Ed, what are you talking about? I'm going to do something for the next decade. I'm going to affect 1 billion people. That's 1/8 of the university. And I used to live in New York, so I love the New York accent. Forgive me, I shouldn't do that. I still love New York, even though it's got its own little issues right this minute. But the point of the matter is, all of us can affect 1 billion people positively, or we're going to affect them negatively. Or if you do nothing, that's probably going to be a negative effect. So why not choose questions that are going to be uplifting? And I'm going to finish selling 1 billion books during this decade.
Wow.
No one else has ever done it. And by the way, I got plenty of people that say I can't. We were on the biggest show with the Amazon bestseller list the other day, and And Mark Devereaux says, you are the Roger Bannister of books. And I go, oh, wow, that's cool. Bannister in 1953 as a medical doctor ran a 4-minute mile. What happened the next week? I said, Mark, I don't know. I said, 119 people did it. What happened? We were physiologically no different, right? But mentally, we've broken the belief system. And what is happening now is we're breaking belief systems. Shows like yours are waking up people's minds because they're saying, hey, wait a second. Maybe I didn't learn how to ask, or I just asked perfunctory questions. And what you're asking is, how do I ask questions that are going to be supernatural? How do I ask questions that are going to get me to what our book says, to your destiny? Because Crystal and I believe at a soul level, everybody is coded at birth, at DNA and RNA with a destiny. No, you don't understand. I'm an engineer. I'm a garbage man. No, I'm a maid. I'm a housekeeper. All those are what you do, but not who you're becoming.
What changes that destiny though? So are you saying that you believe someone's born with a possibility? Is that what you're calling that destiny? This is what's possible for them? Is that what you mean when you say destiny?
I'm going to do two things. First of all, the answer is yes, but everybody's born with infinite possibility, because if you're Genesis 1:8 says you're made in the image and likeness of God. So if you're made in God's stuff, you got 3 C's. You got to create, right? Because the big guy created, so you're not supposed to create. Number 2, you're here to contribute. You're not here to take the government dole. I'm a real free enterpriser. Number 3 is you're here to be charitable. You're here to make enough surplus, enough excess. And that's why we won the Horatio Algier Award. It means I came from rags to riches, been excessively philanthropic. And this year we're going to help 25,000 kids, not us personally, but our association, Horatio Algier Association, get to college that are at-risk kids that didn't have a chance, that have horrific stories, and they're breakthrough kids. And what we need to do is every one of us, if we fulfill that destiny, whatever it is, and I mean, we're friends with, guys like the top 2 orchestrators in the world, Quincy Jones and Ken Foster, and both guys at 13 got kicked out of school, and both guys had great music ability to orchestrate. Now, there's no test in school, IQ or EQ, that tests that. What happens is, what we're saying is you need an MQ, a motivation quotient. The only way to get to your MQ is become what we're calling a master asker. And one of the stories in our book by our friend Rita Davenport, who I hope you'll interview sometime, is you've got to get your ask in gear.
I love that. I love that. So they're born with infinite possibilities. It's interesting you use gosh, guys, it's so good. You use the word creator, and I want to emphasize that for everybody as well. I just had a dear friend of mine on, a pastor. His name's Erwin McManus. And it was interesting to hear a pastor talk about that too. And he basically said that we're all born to be creators, exactly verbatim, use the same word you just used, Mark. And I think for those of you that are sitting there listening to this and you're saying, hey, I am a garbage man. I'm a school teacher. What is creating about that? Or you're a creator. You can create by asking different questions. Do you know that a new question, you guys, creates a completely different space that didn't exist before you asked it? Just the question creates a brand new space that you can step into. I think, Crystal, people sometimes are afraid to ask this question because they feel ill-prepared for the step after that. And I think one of the blessings that you and I know, now that we're a little further down the road and our faith tells us, is that what we will need, what is required, will be provided once we get into that space. But do you agree with that? That there's this hesitation. If I ask this and then Crystal decides she will mentor me or coach me, now I've got, and that fear alone causes us not to want to ask the question because we feel ill prepared.
Right. People are afraid sometimes of a bigger future because, and I think that's because we don't truly understand who we are, that we are really made. And it's funny, even Christians, they read their Bible, but they don't believe the words on the page. When you look at even the words of Jesus Christ, the things I've done, you can do, but greater than these. I mean, everybody blows past that. What did he just say? That we can do things that are greater than Christ? Like, no one registers that because they're too afraid. They're like, oh, that's not what that meant. That's certainly not what that meant, right? But he talked about the oneness between him and the Father and the oneness between us and our Father, so it's like there is this oneness of God. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? And when you look, if we're created in the Creator's image, we are God's stuff, right? We don't see ourselves as that. And if we could just start asking these questions, so we ponder that and look at ourselves differently to see ourselves who we really are, we do have unlimited potential. And so we just have to get all of our fears out of the way. And our uncertainty, so that we can step into that potential, because it's such a beautiful thing. We all do have this ultimate destiny that I think we're all moving toward. at any given time. But if we don't ask those questions, we can fall short of that destiny for sure. I mean, we have a lot of little, we'll end up somewhere on the road, but it won't be, at our ultimate destiny. And Mark and I also believe that once you feel like you reach a destiny, people look at him, look, Mark, or look at what we've done. Aren't you guys finished? Like, why don't you just go play more golf or something like that? We don't have to work, because we know we're not done. There's more that calls us every day. We know that we need to keep contributing, keep sharing, keep growing, keep creating. There's so much more that we're creating.
Yeah, to your point, and Mark's second point too is to contribute, and that's a never-ending thing. I tell people all the time. They ask, I'm sure people ask you this too. Is I don't like when someone gets very wealthy and go, "Hey, getting rich won't make you happy." Well, that's a lie. I mean, I'm much happy. I was happy poor and happy rich. I'm much happier rich. And
right.
Me too.
Same.
I bought a nice pair. I bought a nice watch a while ago. It made me happy for a while. But so for someone to tell you it doesn't make you happy, I can't stand when that happens. Here's what it doesn't do. It doesn't fulfill you. What fulfills you is contributing. And there's a huge difference between happiness and fulfillment. And you said something earlier about dreams. I want to get into for a minute too I just want everyone to just consider something as you're listening to these two amazing souls. What if you really were born to do something great with your life?
Right.
If you don't believe it, if you don't believe it, is there a little power in you asking yourself, what if I really was born to do something great with my life in big ways and in small ways? You don't think that when Mark was helping set up those books for Dr. Dyer back in the day, that wasn't in some small way contributing to doing something great. Now, that small step, little did he know would lead to a bigger step someday of Chicken Soup for the Soul and hundreds of millions of books sold. Both are doing something great. And so maybe you'll start today with something small, what you think is small and insignificant in greatness, that can lead to something bigger. But Crystal, you said earlier dreams. I think questions are correlated to dreams. Now, you said you have these very clear dreams. I happen to believe our dreams aren't hallucinations sometimes. I think they're God giving us a glimpse into what is possible in our lives. Could you speak to that for a minute about how you feel about dreams and people being conscious of dreaming while they're awake, not just asleep?
Right. No, there's no doubt our brain does these, sort of processing, discharging dreams. That's one type of dream.
Sure.
But there are definitely these dreams, and I've had many of them, that are guiding you. And I think to the degree that you can trust God's perfect universe, the thing of it is when you go into a dream state, you're going into an altered brainwave state. So your conscious mind is no longer filtering. So that huge well of your subconscious is actually freely connecting with all of the information in God's beautiful universe. And so when you start to seek through questions and wondering and inquiry, you will start to get those answers. And honestly, I've been just so blessed to I honestly feel like I've gone to different planes and seen different things. And it sounds crazy that I'm saying this right here. A lot of people would go, "Oh, that's nuts. No one can do that." And I would probably think that too, had I not done that sort of thing. I think, our consciousness can travel, it's not necessarily anchored to our body. Our conscious awareness goes way beyond our body. If you think about it, when we die, we still are sitting there, as sort of a lump of meat with our brains still completely intact, but our brain isn't doing anything. Yeah. So our brain is really just a mechanism to store information and process it. but the mind goes so far beyond the brain, right? And it goes out and connects to all that there is. So when you live in that state of wonder and inquiry, and what are the answers, and what is my greatest expression, God, for which you made me. Will you show me that? Will you reveal that to me? Things will start to open up to you when you expect, anticipate, and wonder. It's truly magical.
Expect, anticipate, and wonder, everybody. And by the way, I know you're not crazy, because I've experienced some of that myself. And candidly, I want everyone to know, it's been talked about on the show before, but oftentimes some of these, I don't know, you want to call them achievers, people that are fulfilling the highest expression of themselves and really pursuing it, that have been on the show, have shared that with me privately. And even in my own life, I'll tell you guys that for me, the power of asking great questions and dreaming while you're awake, even like what's possible in my life, and then having those things become real, has been one of the all-time great confirmations of my faith, that I know that there's got to be my Father in heaven. By the way, I think you guys are this way too. I'm a devout Christian. I also believe in vibration and energy and plugging into something big. I believe in all of that. And I just believe my God created that whole quantum field, if you want to call it that. But having said all of that, everybody, having said all of that, dreaming, asking a question, having a dream, having that happen will be one of the great confirmations, not that you need it this way, but that there's something amazing at work in this life, and that this life is incredible, and that you were destined to do something special with your lives. And I want you to get that out of today, because I didn't know we would go this direction today, yet I feel incredibly blessed that we have. And so I promised you a certain time frame, just so you know. I would go 14 hours with you guys today, because I really believe that this has been the fastest 40 minutes or